What is continuity in life? What is serendipity? And how does one manage their interpretations of signs throughout their life? I'm Michael, a regenerative architect. We are sons of God, S-U-N, lowercase s for plural. We are of a fractal, I will say, soul, and we are stacked up on and living in a universal consciousness. As I look out across many people using terms like resonance and stewardship and intentional, and I have a number of folks that I follow on various platforms, mostly LinkedIn. I spend most of my social media energy and observations and signal gathering on LinkedIn because of the social media platforms that are available. That one is seemingly still attended to mostly by what I would call professionals that are looking to promote something in their career, sell something that they have built, show something they have built, or get employment or post a job. So I believe LinkedIn is a good source for seeing information that other people are working on. And I'm talking about continuity in life and sharing specifically continuity in my life and explaining why I'm making this statement that we are sons of God. A number of my colleagues are also working on projects that are in the category of physics, geometry, and thermodynamics, and applying them most specifically to information theory. A lot of the folks that seem to be popping up in my feed are looking at the flow of power, how action planning is better done mapping, and how outcomes are better achieved when working on a flow. And I myself have produced content and material based on the Active Inference book published by Carl Friston in 2012, and a further research paper, peer review, done by Aliana Marin in 2024. I believe that was released. So of that, I find continuity and connectivity to my early childhood. Around 3 years old, I had a recurring pattern of, at the time, I would classify them as nightmares more than dreams. And to me, at 3 years old, my interpretation of them then, as it is now, is that a pattern of ongoing abuse of children was leading up to the end of the world. And the end of the world in my dream, nightmare, at 3 years old, that was recurring, was specifically me being chased by dinosaurs, and then everything being wiped out, me and the dinosaurs included. Now, one can also look back at a pattern of myself growing up in a, I would call traumatized household. By age 3, my parents fought a lot with each other, and there was a lot of screaming. My father would flip the kitchen table. At one point, he would come to throw a TV through a glass pane window, window panes, M&M. From there, you could certainly have a perspective that would say, well, adverse childhood events, ACEs, sure, this kid would have those nightmares. I'm very present with that. I understand that perspective. I don't disagree with it. That's certainly a potential source that somehow my mind would just manifest those images from trauma. The challenge with that and holding that in any category of honest and at the chance of trying to put it in the category of true, that those two nightmares could have just manifested in my 3-year-old brain from being in a loud household. with physical violence going on to the house, not necessarily to each other, but to the house. However, most kids don't draw what they haven't seen to some degree. And by 3, I don't recall any exposure to dinosaurs. Perhaps, but I don't think so. And then the other image was of child abuse. Lots and lots of children, primarily female as I am recalling it now. It was all female. And bound to clotheslines, like lines of children being abused. And this happened again and again and again for weeks. How does this tie into us being sons of God? How does this tie into continuity of my life? How does this tie into my observations of my colleagues and peers on LinkedIn and their use of words like resonance and stewardship and intention and the work they're doing in physics and thermodynamics and applying it to information and truth-seeking? I've been looking for the meaning of life and the understanding of God since those 3-year-old dreams, and again since 9. At 9 years old, I had a moment where I just suddenly froze. I was bringing laundry up from my parents' basement, and I just stopped. Looked up at this light and had this moment of going, my gosh, how there's so many grains of sand on a beach and there's only one of me. How insignificant am I in the grand scheme of things? I had not, well, I guess people would call this an out-of-body experience. I don't know how many minutes I was standing on that stoop, but while I was there, it felt like I was observing the entire universe, deeply, in a connected way. It left me with the question, how would I save the world? What would I do that could be so big that would provide value? Because otherwise, I'm just a speck of sand. A year later, I got a Texas Instrument and started coding and programming. And then I lived an arc of life where I spent a lot of time fixing electronics, electricity, studying, problem solving, troubleshooting people, supporting people with a lot of stress and trauma and anxiety, my own parents, grandparents, on and on. The arc, the continuity is I never stopped trying to answer that question. How do I save them? How do I save the world? What does this have to do with dinosaurs? What does the end of the world have to do with saving the world? What is the end of the world? What is going on? All these questions I traveled through my entire life and career with. Along that arc, I picked up things like active listening. I picked up Maslow's theory of hierarchy. I came to understand how people self-actualize when their safety needs are met, and then on up the pyramid. I learned active listening allowed me to reflect and coach back to people what they said, sometimes in ways that allowed them to have better understanding and a breakthrough of their own paradox, see it different, see it better. Through my career at Allstate, I was put in several situations and opportunities to be in very high stakes situations, do a lot of troubleshooting, have to be factual because the computers can only be fixed the way they broke, regardless of what somebody thinks about the computer problem. The bug only goes away when you see that it's a moth in the circuit or there's actually an error in the code. I found that fixing computer problems more times than not took helping people understand themselves and understanding each other with more clarity. That gave me a lifelong lived experience of calibrating signals. Calibrating signals then became formalized in my understanding through my reading of the Active Inference book published by Carl Friston. There's another piece of literature that I picked up along my career, and that is, take me a second, it's thin slicing is the concept. I'll have to come back to the title. It'll take me a second on the title. I apologize. The concept is thin slicing. Freakonomics. That's the book and the author, Freakonomics. And the thin slicing concept says that we make better decisions when we have just a few / the right data points. For example, trying to pick out the right cell phone or buy the right car, we could, as the person making the decision, quickly get overwhelmed if we have too much data. Thin slicing says if you adjust the blinders that you have, blinders and blinds became formalized in my understanding through active inference. More formally, it's called a Markov blanket. This idea has spilled out from active inference and is shared with other areas and is used in Markov chains and other ways in computer logic and computer reasoning. When you continue reading active inference, and I continue mapping it to my lived experience of working with people and projects, when did things work, when didn't they? How did we get through a 36-hour virus attack and clean it up? How did we sometimes at Allstate get on these marathon SWAT calls and translate literally between languages and time zones and people's understanding of one system to another and actually arrive at a solution? In ways, these are miracles. How do we pull them off again and again and again? What were the systems? What were the ways? What were the bright spots? Bright spots then became formalized as I looked at work I did in the community and many programs that look to lift up a community and improve its identity and improve its energy. There's a number of colleagues that are working in and around Markov blankets, blinders, thermodynamics, physics, and they're trying to measure identity. Some are trying to measure consciousness, and many of them are looking at consciousness as being an energy. I looked at my lived experience as an IT professional, someone that writes software code, has done major projects, significant change. And I saw when people were surprised and when they rejected the change and when they leaned into the change. Surprise as a change factor became formally understandable to me through the book Active Inference and mapping it back through Markov blankets and mapping it back through Freakonomics to understand thin slicing. How could the causality chains in Freakonomics, which are very similar to the when you give a mouse a cookie understanding, relate to Markov blankets and then relate to Chip and Dan Heath and their work on change management and how to change when change is hard and things like made to stick. They too describe, in other words, Markov blankets, managing surprise, minimizing boredom, and operating change within a survivable band. And all of this, again, becomes measurable with the mathematics of active inference. The mathematics of active inference is the other half of E equals MC squared. This math has been sought after and developed and worked on and refined for over 200 years. When I sit present with the math, Markov blankets, world models, active inference, the minimization of variational energy, that's an active inference term, the minimization of expected free energy, that's an active inference term, Maslow's theory of hierarchy, my search for the meaning of life and God, it measures out to indicate the sun is induction. Protons are not created. As the energy of the sun reaches out through space, there's a fourth layer, a fourth dimension that I cannot yet fully articulate or explain back to you. Others are working on that aspect across a number of different approaches. When God's energy flows from the sun, that induction power, it creates matter. God's energy creates Earth, our moon, Pluto, Venus, everything in between. Earth stacks up to be fully conscious. The oceans, the Earth's core, the weather, it balances God's energy. We affect that energy because God gave us free will, but there's still serendipity. God set the stars where they are. We can't move those. When I look at the arc of my career, political careers, what others say about what can be predicted, what can't be predicted, people that hold crystals, people that find peace, people that reorganize after trauma and come to be arguably some of the most caring, giving souls, while people who have never been in and out of prison or never had a quote-unquote major grief or trauma event continue to just skip through life and not really seem all that present and not really help another human out very often. All of this reads and indicates that life, the meaning of it, what is God? Who is God? I don't know the who. The meaning of life is living within the bounds of the serendipity that God has set for us. There are some things in life that work and others that don't. There are times when we try to have children and it works out very well. There's times that it doesn't work out well. There are patterns that the universe, our lives, the outcomes tend to follow. The variance is the free will that pushes back and acts upon it. When your energy is low, you come to act negatively upon the world, and the world acts negatively upon you. This can manifest inside of our bodies, much as the everybody keeps score and the minimization of free energy equation both agree. When we have low energy and we act negatively upon the world can act back negatively upon our bodies. We can have big surprises to things like microplastic, chemicals, poisons, and all of those things can give rise to cancer. Those stressors can give rise to deep tension, high blood pressure, hypertension. I'm not the first to say these things. I do believe I am one of the first to see that it is unifying with active inference. Active inference is unifying across thermal, information, cybernetics. We are the minimization. We are the flow. We are one consciousness. We are of patterns and of numbers, prime numbers, Fibonacci, beautiful spirals in, beautiful spirals out. When our energy spirals down low, it breaks our body. When our body is being beaten, it can spiral down the energy of our brain. We have a left and a right brain. If the energy spirals down too much, it can come to be seen as a number of disorders where people cannot settle. Things like anosognosia are far more explainable and measurable with deterministic understanding when we look at the minimization and the flow of energy through the human body and the corresponding flow of that energy through the human brain and spinal cord. Every creature acts upon this world, and every part of this world and universe acts upon the creatures in it, the plants, animals, and us. We pumped too much oil out of Gaia. Having removed that much lubricant, the probability of earthquakes goes up. I'm not the first to say this. It's measurable with active inference. It all stacks up and down. The ozone minimizes how much UV gets through. The iron core of the earth can hold a tremendous amount of heat and slowly let it out over time. as you go up and down the cores. Excuse me. Things like fossil fuels and the gas pockets, they help regulate the power of God through the universe, through our earth. And as we've acted so negatively upon our earth from a low energy place, we put at risk magma shifting and more volcanoes going off. How and when exactly these things would or could happen, I'm not that good with the math yet. And more importantly, what can we do about it? If we've set in motion a deterioration of our planet, is there anything we can do? Is there any way that this has a continuous arc with my life and the fact that I've been looking for these understandings? The literatures I've read allowed me to practice these things before I saw the mathematics presented in 2012. They were written in 2012 and published. I didn't see them till this year, 2026. I've had them for about 6 months. When I had my IT career, I tried to build a company that was altruistic because I read a book on Darwinism and it explained kinship and how it was observed in nature that cousins took care of cousins. I talked about Maslow's theory of hierarchy. I talked about living on the edge of chaos and that being a good business strategy, because when you're right forward and front on something before anybody else really knows or understands how to make it work, your opportunity goes up. I believe the world is living on the edge of chaos. I believe we could also look at active inference on our world and kinetic energy and see that everybody is so stressed. Our energy is so low. We're not acting kindly on the world. We keep pumping the oil. We threaten to throw rockets and blow up more people. We already have 2 endless wars. Now it sounds like they might start a third. How could it be that we may be able to, as individuals, as I have, look back and see our lives flow, our energy flows up and down. If it flows too low, our left and right brains start to become so active independently, it gets really overwhelming. And in what world would it be true that since 3 years old, I've been predicting that I would come to have this understanding and I'd be able to do something with it? How would that prediction keep playing out to allow me to put chickens in my backyard again, to allow me to do some cleaning today, pick up a magazine that talks about cement and plaster? Rewind a few days ago, I went to a food shelter. And I met some folks that seemed like they may be able to help me make connections with, volunteer programs and nonprofit programs in the prison. And then after cleaning up my garage for my chickens and moving some stuff around, I come across a catalog that says cement and plaster. And then this evening out on a walk, I meet a gentleman who's just retired from cement and plaster and looking to donate time. It seems I may have the opportunity, because I lived on the flow. I read the signs that were in front of me. I may have the opportunity to put together a program with this gentleman to teach felons that are coming out of prison that need employment opportunities how to do concrete and plaster. And he also has licenses in operating heavy equipment. There's still several more steps for a plan like that to come together. And as I have many times, I've organized very large plans and then thrown them out the window and still got the job done. Because when we look up in the sky and we see that the sun is sending us energy, and that everything flowing through that 4th dimension that we don't see or understand, it is following a pattern. And that pattern seems to indicate that I'm not wrong in having my understanding as deeply as I do of active inference. I'm not wrong talking to people like Ted about building reentry programs I wasn't wrong when I built my IT company in an altruistic way and tried to pay it forward and pay it out and help so many people. That does not make anyone perfect. It does indicate that we all have the ability to predict what's happening, adjust our understanding, get just enough data points and realize that God is all around us and through us. And when we come to live on God's plan, within those bounds, we can still have a little bit of surprise and some beautiful, beautiful creativity. And we could be happy, peaceful, no more war, free food, free education, free health for all. Sons of God. S-U-N, lowercase s for plural. Capital G-O-D, not under, of. God flows through us, is in us, and all around us.